Meet Big Ed. He has a tax-funded taste for children. Big Ed knows that the best grooming starts early. He has a plan for your preschoolers, a plan to gender confuse your grade schoolers. But if you think his grooming stops there, you have not been paying attention. Big Ed wants to liberate your daughters from old-fashioned ideas like, well, you already know. Big Ed has dorm rooms ready for you in prison buildings of learning, and professors standing by dedicated to grooming young adults in doubt and unbelief. After all, he is the gatekeeper of this brave new world, and if you want a job, you'll need to pay him with years of your life for a permission slip. Yeah, whatever. You think David paid Goliath for a certificate in giant management before those two squared off? Did Luther major in theses? Was George Washington summa cum laude in empire repellents, while Jefferson focused on ag with a minor in declarations? When the world needs saving, meaningful vocations abound for those who are truly prepared. And the truth is, despite Marxist advances, this is still America, and Big Ed is still a voluntary opt-in. So don't. Not at any level. Not preschool, not middle school, not college. It isn't complicated. When Big Ed offers you free candy, stay away. You'll thank us later. We know it's crazy, but run with us here. Men and women were created in the image of God. You don't need a government certificate of faux learning for personal validation or permission to work. You were born with divine permission to pursue knowledge and understanding, truth, goodness, and beauty. And at New St. Andrews College, we are committed to helping students do just that, to their fullest potential. In an age dominated by chaos, when learning is on a choke leash controlled by Big Ed and his many strange friends, ours is an education for outlaws, an education for men and women committed to building a beautiful and free society in the ruins of the Western world. When thinking is outlawed, only outlaws will think. Yes, Big Ed hates what we do, but his hatred brings us joy. New St. Andrews College. Liberal arts for outlaws. Mind, body, and soul.
You sit in church week after week, embracing the truth of God's Word. You believe the gospel and claim Jesus Christ as your Lord. Yet you continue to struggle with pornography. You feel like a hypocrite, returning to the sin you hate that mocks the God you love. You desperately wonder, is lasting freedom even possible? Yes, you can overcome pornography, but not alone. 2 Timothy 2:22 says, "Now flee from youthful lusts and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. Only by repeatedly running from sin to Christ with other believers can you hope to enjoy lasting freedom. You can live with purity and integrity. Take courage, seek accountability, and do whatever is necessary. Get equipped at accountable2you.com.
Yes, and we're back. We're getting towards the end of the week. It's Thursday. It's CrossPolitic on the Five Loud Feast Network.
Yes.
You hear this?
Yes.
What you're hearing from me right now.
It's better than y'all, folks.
I coach basketball. I coach junior high because my daughter's on junior high. Those practices are 6 in the morning. They go to 7:30.
Yeah.
And then I coach varsity girls because my daughter's on varsity.
Yep.
And I coach that practice from 6 to 8 o'clock at night.
Right.
So this is my Thursday. I have no practice tomorrow on Friday.
That's what you're saying. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
No
Tomorrow's
practice.
Friday. It's
Not
my day
for the
off of
show,
practice.
just no practice.
So
Yeah,
I'm curious. What is the ceremonial significance of the candles being lit on Tuesday, but not lit yesterday, but
Right.
now lit again with a wreath on Thursday?
Because you don't know the principle of every other day in the scriptures?
No, I guess I don't. I'm just
It's
wondering.
some sort of numerology thing. No, I'm just kidding.
This is a 5.
We got a really bad liturgy here.
Well, yeah.
We don't know what we're doing. We're just like, get some candles, light them quick, and put a wreath around it. We're going to have something tomorrow. We don't know what yet.
Yeah.
I think Bree's making up for, maybe this is not going to be that good of a show, so we should light the candles.
Yesterday was on fire by
And a
itself.
wreath. That'll keep them busy.
No, the wreath was here Tuesday, wasn't it?
No.
No, so
Oh, yesterday.
But there was no. The
candles weren't lit.
They weren't lit, were they, Bree?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure one of you asked if we should light them, and
I said no.
And he said no, and I was wondering why.
because I was going to light them during the show, and nobody reminded me
And
during
you
the show to
forgot,
light
you
them.
forgot to do it.
I got carried away by the whole trial and soda
So
stuff.
we got our lawyer coming on here, Davis Younts, and we're going to talk about all of Biden's pet pardons.
I just want to talk the whole time about our weird liturgy.
Yeah, hey, we're trying, Pastor.
I mean,
this is what happens when you.
I know.
Hey, look at the. You notice behind you too.
What's that?
What's that?
Oh, is that new?
That's new. Yeah.
You had ones up yesterday.
Yeah, and so you had yours up yesterday
those were
too.
up yesterday,
Theirs up
too.
yesterday too.
We don't know what we're doing, obviously. Christmas is time for decking the halls, signing. I'm just going to read what it says. Signing jingle bells.
Mm-hmm. Don't do that. Help them out, Pastor. Give some grace.
Okay.
Be like Biden. Pardon them. Pardon.
Okay.
Come on. Yeah, there you go.
That's funny.
Singing jingle bells, feasting on cookies, and gifting your family members a Fight, Laugh, Feast pub membership.
Yes, with a wreath
Yeah.
and matches.
Yeah. Give the gift of hard-hitting theology, CrossPolitic backstage interviews, a library of all the Fight, Laugh, Feast conference talks, courses with David Bonson, Doug and Nancy Wilson, and much more. Get 15% off an annual membership at the silver level or above through the end of December. Head on over to fightlaughfeast.com. That's fightlaughfeast.com. We may not know what to do about Advent, but we know what to do about the news.
Is that what it says?
No, I'm just...
Well, that's lots of grace. That's just a lot of grace.
I was just making it better.
Hey, Bree, do we have all our conference talks in there yet, or most of them in the? Most of our conference from this conference are in the club portal.
Prodigal America?
Yeah.
I have a bunch of interviews I did with most of the speakers.
They're coming too.
And
They're
there
coming-
should be
yeah, they're
out
coming here
as well. And it was fantastic.
For club members.
I actually asked them. This is really fun because I don't think many people
You
talk about
asked
this.
every speaker
I
this.
asked every speaker, so tell me, how do you get a girl?
That's right, you did that.
Yes.
That was really, I was
Will
not.
Smith had a movie on that.
Yes, called Hitch. That's right.
Watch Hitch.
Yeah. No, don't. Not for that reason.
That would have been Gabe's answer.
Yeah.
Have you seen Hitch?
I
Now
can't wait to
this
put
is
that
a
together.
story all about how. Never
That's
mind.
not on that movie, is it?
No,
Are you
but
a
Will
Christian struggling to find companies that align with your values and beliefs? Are you a Christian struggling to get through the first 5 minutes of CrossPolitic?
Yes.
Squirrely
David Younts
Joe,
is.
Squirrely Joe's has you covered for all of your coffee needs. All of your coffee is hand selected and roast fresh every day by a family of fellow believers. Try them out and you'll savor exceptional coffee while knowing that your investment supports a company committed to following God's teachings and upholding truth and righteousness, ensuring your hard-earned money contributes to the growth of God's kingdom. Stop giving your hard-earned dollars to pagans who support evil. We have a fantastic offer for our listeners. Your first bag of coffee is free. All you have to do is cover the shipping. Head over to squirrelyjoes.com/crosspolitic. That's squirrelyjoes.com/crosspolitic to claim your free bag of coffee.
And Joe
today.
Joe
Christian
served-
coffee tastes so much better.
Joe served. We had Squirrely Joe's at our conference.
Yeah.
Every break.
Prodigal America.
Fantastic.
Fort Worth.
Yeah. The one problem was, Joe, if you're listening, he didn't have half and half from my wife.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
We got to talk about that for this conference.
It's not
My
Squirrely
wife
Creams.
needed half and half.
It's Squirrely Joe's.
He only promised free coffee.
Joe's from the military. He's like, I don't need. Give me that powder cream.
All right.
Yeah.
Attorney Davis Younts
Is regretting his decisions.
I think he's suing us now.
is a Christian husband, homeschool dad, attorney, and former military officer providing legal guidance and expert criminal defense to military, federal law enforcement, and other patriots. Former prosecutor, JAG, #1 rated defense counsel in the Air Force.
He's killing it.
He runs a focused legal practice helping Americans preserve their religious freedom, equal protection under the law, and basic constitutional rights in criminal and administrative proceedings. Davis, thanks for coming back on CrossPolitic.
Hey, thanks, Pastor. I need to hire you as my hype man. I like it.
Come on, Davis! Oh, man. So we are really excited to have you back on. And I mean, again, seriously, we really appreciate your kindness and your generosity with your time coming on the show.
Brother. Yep.
We particularly want to talk to you about these presidential pardons. Yeah. And of course,
do you got a video clip?
Davis, because I know how much you love to hear about these pardons, we created just a 2-minute clip just for you.
Just to get you excited.
Just for you. Because
Nice.
I'm going to defend Biden on this one. Y'all ready? Hit the clip.
Will the president pardon or commute his son if he's convicted?
So I've answered this question before. It was asked of me not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, and I was very clear, and I said no.
Is there any possibility that the president would end up pardoning his son?
No. It's still a no. It's still a no.
It will always be a no.
It's still a no. It will be a no. It is a no, and I don't have anything else to add. Will he pardon his son? No.
It's his prerogative.
Presidential promise to put the law before family was asked directly, and he has said he wouldn't pardon.
Current president of the United States has so much respect for the law that he has said he would not pardon his son. Again, it's all about the contrast.
President Biden saying, I will respect whatever this jury decides, versus Donald Trump after he was convicted on 34 counts, saying the entire system is rigged against him.
He would not pardon his son. He would not commute his sentence. How stark is this difference? I mean, how can Republicans keep making this argument now that Joe Biden has really put it out there? Those words so completely contrast with what his opponent, now a convicted felon himself, continues to say about the U.S. courts.
The contrast to how Trump has behaved, how Trump has treated the rule of law. This was a good day for the system, good day for sort of America as an example of how the rule of law should work.
The Democrats stand for the rule of law. Remember, law and order. And we've been saying that Trump's not above the law, Hunter Biden's not above the law, no one is above the law.
It's his prerogatives. This is what Biden's doing right now. Yeah. It's his prerogative. So take that, Davis. It's his prerogative. He can do whatever he wants to do. It's his prerogative. That's my argument, Davis.
I'm sorry, Davis. Just for the record, I had nothing to do with that.
That's just my argument. It's Biden's prerogative. He can do what he wants to do. He's the president. Your response.
Well, I would say that most legal scholars would agree that the president does have the authority to issue these blanket pardons. But I would say it's a violation of God's law, which we can get into. There's a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun here.
Yes.
We should have started talking about this the other night. Yeah.
He just pulled God's law on you, Knox.
He knows my love language. You may continue. Wait.
No, listen, there's a lot here. So what's I have enjoyed the most about this whole debate, once President Biden issued what everybody calls a blanket pardon. So he basically said any potential federal crime, federal offense, anything he did that could ever be charged under federal law for the past 11 years is gone, is forgiven, is pardoned. That's what President Biden did. So that is, hookers, everybody uses this language. That's unprecedented, right? So when we start talking about a pardon, that truly is unprecedented. We talk about the length of that time and sort of the blanket nature of it.
Why do you think that's 2000? Was it 2014 or 2011? He blanketed
2011.
Why do you think he only went back 10 years? Why not 20?
I think part of it's just looking at the statute of limitations. Right. So most of these potential crimes would be statute of limitations. So I just think he went back as far as he thought he could and then looked at the statute of limitations. So just from a practical, legal standpoint, that's what he's done. He said all crimes, all potential federal offenses. He identified a few very specifically, but that's what's happened. So that's what everybody is debating. And there's why I enjoy this debate is go back to 2020 when Trump pardoned General Mike Flynn. Mm-hmm. All of these liberal law professors were up in arms, calling it a blanket pardon, saying it was too broad and questioning the constitutionality of all of this. So what's funny about that, just how things work, is there's actually a lot of interesting research. There's a lot of law review articles and other debates about how broad the president's authority is, how specific a pardon has to be. But it's hilarious because any good arguments that were made could now be used against Biden. And of course, those same law professors will probably be very silent at this point.
Okay, so
suddenly there's nuance.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's his prerogative. Hey, it's his prerogative. So wait, I got to ask. So these potential crimes, are they state crimes where he did this in? So does a state all
international
of a sudden,
crimes like
but it's federal pardon, right? Does this apply to the state crimes that he has as well, or no?
It does not. It does not, right? So when we look at Article 2 of the Constitution, it only applies to federal offenses. It does. A presidential pardon has no impact on potential state crimes.
That's interesting.
Okay.
Right.
So what?
That's right.
So what are you thinking about this?
Well, because if somebody wanted to curry favor with Trump, right? I mean, look what they did to him in certain states. They went directly after Trump.
There were certain
New York,
ambitious attorney generals,
Georgia. Right? They decided to say, no, we're going to take this up. We're going to deal with this. And it's like, now we got a pardon, so the federal side is done. But wherever these crimes took place, whatever state they're in, somebody might say, but it ain't over yet.
So, Davis, you said the blanket nature of this pardon is the unprecedented part of it. Can you explain what is the precedence for presidential pardons?
I think it's all the hookers involved.
Thank you, Gabe.
Wow.
Thank you.
Wow. No. So look, if you go back to, there's sort of two histories to look at when you talk about pardons, just in general, right? So not to go too deep into the history, but the whole idea of a pardon came from, you could look at English common law when there was a king, an all-powerful king. So go back before the Glorious Revolution, go back before the Magna Carta, and it was the sovereign prerogative, right? So that's what Knox is talking about. This idea, the idea was, though, that the law comes from the mouth of the king or the sovereign, and therefore the sovereign, the king, can speak, forgiveness, can speak a pardon. So there's sort of that history, and then you have the Magna Carta, you have the Glorious Revolution, you have other things that happened.
What happened in the Magna Carta that applies to this pardon thing that you're talking about?
Well, one of the things that happens is, remember, the barons in England rebelled against the king. And as part of the agreement they reached, the barons were given pretty broad pardons for any potential crimes against the crown. So there are actually pardons that were part of that negotiation, which is fascinating.
Would part of the story here also be, though, the beginnings of a more constitutional / like Lex Rex understanding of law, rather than it being all solely based in the king?
Absolutely. And that's what happened in the English common law, right?
Right.
So look at Blackstone, look at the English common law. Blackstone and others in the English common law used language like, if a pardon is too broad, right, then it's worthless. Then it doesn't have an effect because it's meant to be specific. So that's the whole debate now when you look at the Constitution and American law, is what was the intent of the founders? And again, there's two sides to that, which makes this very, very interesting. A lot of people would say, look at the English common law that was in place at the time. That gives you the original intent of our founders, and they would recognize that a pardon needs to be specific and it needs to address either crimes somebody's been charged with, convicted of, or at least are known and anticipated. We could talk about the significance of that. On the counter side to it, James Madison was president, and he pardoned the pirates Lafitte. Right. So the pirates Lafitte, Jean Lafitte, Pierre Lafitte, these notorious pirates, he pardoned essentially all of them for any crimes they committed related to piracy or really anything else, federal offenses, after the War of 1812. So you do have this debate. That was sort of a blanket pardon for a large group of people because they helped America defeat the British during the War of 1812, the Battle of New Orleans, and all of that. So there is this back and forth debate. But I will say, if you look at basic principles, the law does look I think, frown upon, English common law would certainly frown upon this idea of pardoning someone for sort of any and all crimes. And the reason for that, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, if the sovereign or the president is pardoning somebody for a crime they didn't know was committed, is it actually a valid pardon? So, for example, if it comes out that, Hunter's responsible for murdering 15 people, is that pardon really effective if the president did not know about those additional crimes? That's sort of an open question in our law as it stands today.
I think Hunter killed Epstein.
Thank you.
Right, exactly. So that's one open piece of this.
The dude could have been involved.
Sure.
Right. Yeah, right. So what was the person issuing the pardon? What did they actually know about? What were they actually aware of?
Yeah.
The other thing that's interesting about this is there is a concept that a pardon could be invalid if it was obtained corruptly. In other words, if it was obtained for illegal purposes or the result of a bribe or some sort of other illegality, English common law, they were very concerned about sort of that level of corruption. So the question would be, if it's not specific enough, how would we ever know if it was an immoral, corrupt, and potentially illegal pardon?
Okay.
But ultimately, what has to happen in all of these cases is someone who's facing these crimes has to be able to take the pardon and present it to a judge and say, Your Honor, I have a get out of jail free card. Either this conviction has to be overturned or this prosecution can't continue. These charges have to be dismissed. And that's one of the other issues. There's a question of what can a judge do with a pardon that is so general? Does it really cover what's anticipated or what's being charged?
So you started off with saying that God's law is against the pardons. But, I mean, God gave me a blanket pardon, so I think you're wrong.
But what is part of that pardon? What does that pardon from God anticipate? Repentance, forgiveness, and turning to God, right? So Isaiah 55, 6 and 7 says, Seek the Lord while he may be found, call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. Let him return to the Lord, that he may have compassion on him, and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon. So my point in saying that is this. Even looking at English common law, looking at these basic principles, looking at biblical principles for a pardon, the idea of a pardon is known sin that is being confessed, forgiveness is being sought, and that pardon is a response to that. So I would submit to you what we should be doing as Christians is we should be asking the question, if the pardon is about forgiveness, then the person receiving it there should be a contrition there. There should be, at least generally, a common thought was there should be some sort of admission of guilt. And a pardon, in order to be valid, this is fascinating, in order to be valid, a pardon must be accepted by the person who's receiving it. So the Supreme Court was very clear on this in a case in 1915, believe it or not, that the pardon actually has to be formally accepted, and then it has to be presented to a judge or to a court in order to be deemed valid. So I just think there's so much rich biblical principle there. So I would say there is a Christian guideline. There is a biblical guideline for all of this. And I think that a person, in order to receive a pardon, there should be a necessary aspect of both forgiveness and actually seeking that forgiveness, admitting that there was wrongdoing that occurred, and then actually using it, accepting it, formally accepting it, and putting forward to the court. And I think all of that's there. I think there's a lot there that's powerful.
That's really helpful. So you're also saying, though, there needs to be, this presupposes a form of clarity of what the crime is. Right. So
absolutely.
So we need to have a very clear list.
Instead of a blanket,
right.
Biden pardon.
What are we pardoning? And then what are you confessing? Because you're guilty. So pardoning is not removing the reality of the crime taking place. You really were guilty. You're confessing that. What we're choosing to do in the pardon is like, great, thank you for your confession. We won't punish you towards the extent that you deserve. Do you think there needs to be some sort of restitution in the side of this pardon as well? Because otherwise we don't have justice, right?
Right. And I think that absolutely could be part of it. I mean, even, again, I think it's kind of an interesting historical example with the Pirates Lafitte. What they did was heroic, right? They were willing to risk their lives and participate in this battle. So you could argue the restitution that they gave was present. They gave something back to a nation that they had been, damaging and all of that. So I think that's very interesting. And you can see that in some pardons. You can see, sometimes people that receive a pardon have been punished. They have served jail time. They've had other consequences, and there's moving forward in order to receive that forgiveness. So I think that that's one of the issues, one of the concerns with this pardon to Hunter when you talk about a blanket pardon, and the judge that is dealing with his case where he has been convicted even pointed this out. He said, hey, I think there's aspects of this pardon that may be unconstitutional, but I don't even have to look at those because it does include the charges I have in front of me. So if Hunter's lawyers properly apply to this court for relief, then the charges will be dismissed. And I just think that's funny, too, about all this, the arrogance of Hunter Biden and his lawyers. They literally sent an email to the court with a link to the press release. They didn't even go through the proper process to say, hey, judge, dismiss the charges, which was, I think, just shows the level of disrespect for this whole process that was present. That will be fixed, I'm sure. But just that to me was another aspect of this. So they just essentially emailed the judge and say, hey, dad says I'm good to go. And the judge is like, all right, guys, let's go through the process. Send me the official paperwork. I need to see the signed pardon, and then we'll dismiss these charges.
Do y'all have that kind of white privilege? Y'all ain't got that? Oh, just wondering.
That's a
whole nother level of privilege.
That's not even white privilege. I don't even know what that is.
That's thug privilege. So I was just looking it up. So I think you referred to this, but I just, for our listeners, for our audience, because I'd forgotten this. So Article 2, Section 2 of the United States Constitution is where it explicitly grants the president the authority to grant pardons.
Right.
Okay.
It says the president shall be commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of the several states when called into the actual service of the United States. He may require the opinion in writing of the principal officer in each of the executive departments upon any subject relating to the duties of the respective offices. Mm-hmm. And here's the key part. And he shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. So that's the first paragraph of Section 2, Article 2 of the Constitution. So it's not completely out of thin air,
right?
That this idea of pardons is being enacted. But your point, Davis, is that what is very unprecedented is the fact that this is not being clearly identifying particular crimes and offenses, which it says it's supposed to be pardons for offenses against the United States. Rather, it's just this get out of jail free card, like anything that he might have done at any time over the course of these years. He's free. There's no prosecution can stand against him. And that's the point you're making.
It is. And again, if you look at it statistically, depending on how you try to describe what a pardon is versus clemency and amnesty, there's been about you could just look at different periods of time and say, okay, from like 1974 to 2018, let's say there were 2,000, there's probably about 2,300 pardons that were issued, presidential pardons in that time frame.
Okay.
There were 2 that were broad. The rest were very, very specific. There were 2 that were somewhat broad. One was Ford's pardoning of Nixon.
Okay.
So Ford's pardoning of Nixon was not charged with a specific crime. He resigned so he wouldn't be impeached, so he wouldn't go through that formal process. And Ford pardoned him. And it wasn't, it was a little bit broad. It was essentially any potential federal crimes for 4 years while serving as president. That was the general broad nature of it. No one challenged that. A lot of people were upset. Some people did question the constitutionality of that being that broad, but that was one. The other broad pardon that we've had was when H.W. Bush pardoned a whole category of people involved with the Iran-Contra scandal. But even there, that was a little more specific because it was related to sort of a specific event, right? A specific period of time and sort of specific actions related to that scandal. So maybe the crimes weren't as specified, but it was a little clearer what he was seeking to do there.
So far, I guess, I'm sorry, Pastor, do you have anything else you want to throw in there?
Well, I have another line of questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, so one of the questions, I want to go back to the biblical law part, and I don't know if everything you already just said is all that you were thinking of, Davis, but we started kicking this around the other day when we were talking. Who were we talking to? I forgot. Jacob Riom about whether Canada should become the 51st state and Trudeau the governor of that state.
I lost friends because I said no.
But as we were starting to kick this around, I was just thinking, so, I mean, in biblical law, there are a number of commands. So I'm thinking of, I just did a quick search on my concordance here. a number of commands in the law that this is there are particular penalties that are that are required to be paid, and there's this repeated refrain: "Thine eye shall have no pity upon them. Thine eye shall have no pity upon him. Your eye shall have no pity upon him. Thou shalt put away the guilt of innocent blood from Israel, that it may go well with you. Thine eye shall not pity, but life shall go for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot." My question is so it seems like, given the repeated nature of this, God knows that our tendency is to start going light on criminal justice. The tendency to make excuses and to say, well, there was extenuating circumstances and there was this and there was the other thing. And so God, I mean, it's again, I just did a search on pity because I remember that was the word. And you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in Deuteronomy alone where that's the command, no pity. No. And I'm sure there's probably a particular set of kinds of crimes. I mean, maybe these are all violent crimes. Maybe some of them have to do with worshiping of false gods or, that kind of thing. But my question is given that, how does that then fit with even just a biblical, political theology, a biblical civics, a biblical criminal code, that where God says, look, you're going to be tempted to pity people. You're going to be tempted to have compassion on people, and you must not in order for my blessing to be on your land. How does that fit into all this?
Well, I think it helps us drive a principle that any pardon that's issued should be extremely rare. It should be a power that's used very, very rarely. And I do think it needs to be very, very specific, and there needs to be a level of contrition involved in it, right? And I do think there should be some consequences. So I think there are reasons and there are ways that it makes sense. I mean, again, we could look at, there are a lot of biblical examples. One I was thinking of, and I haven't really put a lot of thought into it, but what about, King David? King David was, arranged a murder, committed adultery, and yet was forgiven. There were absolutely consequences, right? There was a punishment there, but there was forgiveness. And I think that's the balance. But I do agree with you. The underlying principle in this, it should not be a blanket get out of jail free card for anything that you've done. And that's not how God's law works anyway, because God knows everything about each of us. He knows all of our sins. So when we are forgiven, it is for everything that we have done, everything that we will do for all eternity is forgiven in that. So there's something very, very powerful about that. But I do think you're on the right track in how we should be analyzing these. And that's part of the reason why I'm just not a fan of this idea of a blanket pardon. I think we should know what is the crime. There should be a level of admission of guilt and contrition.
Even in the case of our redemption in Christ, it's not like there's no penalty paid.
No, it's still blood.
Right.
I mean, Christ pays the penalty. Right. Yeah. So it's not like just this let bygones be bygones.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. The penalty is placed on Christ instead of us. But as you noted as well, but part of our response is calling on the Lord to be saved, it's acknowledging our guilt, acknowledging that we deserve to be the ones that die instead. And it's in that context that God's pardon is granted. But I also just wonder though about like the difference between, so with King David, we were kicking this around too. We were thinking like, well, I mean, God can do that. Right. God can sort of like, it's his law and he understands it perfectly, and not that he's changing it, but like he understands it perfectly. And so he's in a position to say, okay, in this place, this is where I can adjust things. And I'm just wondering, when is it okay for us to adjust things and say, you can have mercy, or, we can have mercy?
Well, and that's why I think there's a huge difference between the president's authority to grant a reprieve or clemency and a pardon. And I do think there's a significant difference. So I really think the power to completely pardon someone should be something we would only exercise when there is a huge national interest in doing so, like a significant, important impact for the nation.
Civil War.
Civil War. And that was really amnesty more than it was, straight up pardons. Those were very conditional. People had to swear loyalty oaths and other things. But when we look at things like, Again, going back to James Madison, there was a national interest in saying, okay, these people did something courageous and heroic. They helped save the nation. We're going to recognize that it's for the good of the nation. You could even make an argument with President Ford. It was for the good of the nation to move on from this. And so pardoning Nixon was a way to have the nation move on and sort of start to heal. So I think that's really what we should be looking for. Clemency, granting someone, release from a life sentence or reducing their punishment or something else. I think that could be, there are situations where there's, unjust treatment, where there's disparate sentencing, where there's not equal protection. And I think the president could use clemency or reprieve in those cases. But I think pardon should be really reserved. And I think there's some argument. There's not a lot of debate. There's not a lot of information on the thoughts of the founders with it, other than just recognizing that England recognizes pardons. They recognized this in common law. But I do think when you look at the fact that this is, the war powers talking about being the commander in chief of the military, this is talking about things that have an important national implication. And I really do think that's what the pardon power should be used for, not for family members. And we can have empathy, right? And say, okay, of course, if I was president, I would want to forgive my son and I would want to protect my son. But I don't think that's in line with God's law. And I think there's an argument to be made. That's not the purpose of the pardon. The pardon isn't to grant family members, friends, buddies, relief. It should be for something that would truly be in the interest of the nation to have that crime forgiven, or where there's been just such an apparent injustice that it needs to be remedied.
So would you argue that the J6ers should be pardoned in the name of national interests?
Yes, absolutely. I think you could make a great argument that in the name of national interest that could be done. But I also think the way they have been treated has been just so out of line for the crime. So at least clemency, right? At a minimum, they should be granted clemency where they're released immediately. They're not violent. I mean, this isn't equal protection of the law when we look at what's happened to most of the J6ers, certainly the ones that were, nonviolent and otherwise. So I think there's a great argument to be made for clemency at a minimum, but certainly a lot of pardons.
Can you make the distinction? You've mentioned it a few times, and maybe I just missed the distinction, but what is the difference between amnesty, clemency, and pardon?
Yeah.
Right. So amnesty is typically used for that language is often used for like a conditional pardon. In other words, we're going to give you amnesty for something you've done. We're going to give you forgiveness for what you've done, but only if you meet certain conditions. Okay. A pardon can be, full or partial. There's other than you accepting it, being willing to accept it, not rejecting it. There's no conditions that are put on it. Clemency is where your sentence is reduced. The consequences of the crime are reduced, but the crime doesn't go away. The conviction doesn't go away. So you hear like commuting a sentence. Obama commuted a lot of sentences for supposedly nonviolent drug offenders. So he reduced their sentences. So that would be clemency or commuting a sentence.
He didn't include Hunter in that. That's weird. Part of the argument I've heard about this a little bit too, not so much applied to this topic on pardoning, but kind of, God's wrath was greater in the New Testament, and God's mercy is greater.
New Testament?
In the New Testament. Is greater.
His wrath?
Is greater in the New Testament.
Okay.
And his mercy is greater in the New Testament. So the wrath of God, you end up in hell. Like this is the last. So his wrath's greater. Okay. And his mercy is greater. And so I've heard the argument before. So maybe judges might have a little more leeway and to apply God's law more mercifully than in the Old Testament.
So like you're saying, sort of relativizing slightly the "you may not have any pity" command in the Old Testament. Yeah, you're saying that like that's loosened up. Because Deuteronomy doesn't apply anymore.
No, they would still argue. People have heard this. They would still argue.
Only half.
But just like there was variations of penalties, and you had wisdom to use in the Old Testament, that maybe you could apply in even a more merciful penalty in the New Testament. So it's not really applied to this conversation, but I wanted to bring that in because and hear what your thoughts are on that, Davis.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting point. I've heard that as well, and I think that's part of just the challenge of understanding and interpreting God's law and using it for our society. I think that's just one of those things we have to consider.
David, I love Davis. Sorry, man. I just noticed when he's short on stuff, he don't want to talk about it anymore.
No, he's like,
he's done. This man just sit up and talk for 15 minutes. He's like, I don't want to talk about that one. And he's cutting it really. I love it about David.
Gabe, but okay.
He's like, I don't want to say no more. There's trouble on the end of this sentence, and I'm cutting it here.
We'll see you later.
So, from what I understand, this is Biden's first pardon, but there's many others that he's thinking about. One of them is, or I guess, who all is in the list right now that you know of for pardons?
So right now, everyone's talking about Adam Schiff is one, which is interesting.
Okay,
Liz Cheney.
There? Hold up, I want to go through these one by one. Why is Schiff up for pardon?
Pencil neck. He's got a pencil neck.
We don't.
I don't know.
That's discrimination.
I don't know.
I would just give him amnesty for that one.
I truly don't know. Other than he's a political enemy of Trump. He's a perceived enemy of Trump. Maybe it's election interference because he's the one that's out there saying that Congress should, not seat President Trump because of the felony case in New York. All of those things. So maybe it's something related to that.
I think it's because of the Russia collusion stuff. He's one of the central figures in the House, going on the news almost every night saying, "Oh, we got the Kraken. It's going to be coming out soon about Trump's Russia collusion."
Right. And he said similar things about J6. I mean, there was certainly evidence that was destroyed, evidence that was lost, evidence that was tampered with, and he was heavily involved in all that as well. So it may, maybe there's something there. But that one's a fun one. That one's an interesting one.
Yeah, I believe that Schiff is rejecting it from what I understand. He's saying he doesn't want to pardon. I think he feels like it looks like he'd be guilty or something like that, and he doesn't want to accept it. Right. So that's interesting that he's actually rejecting the pardon.
If I take that pardon, then I'm saying I'm guilty of this.
I think that's what. Yeah, well, he understands.
That's interesting.
So who else do you have, Davis? Because I have a thought I want to run by you.
Liz Cheney is another.
Okay, yep. Why? What did Liz do?
J6.
I get J6.
Okay.
J6 stuff.
All right.
And then Fauci.
Okay, I get that one.
Yeah, 100%.
That makes complete sense 100%. To me. I'm actually, yeah.
I think they should pardon Fauci and then take all his TSA or his Secret Service security away from him. He's been pardoned.
Can we deport him? Is it possible to remove his citizenship and say that you didn't act American?
I think you could pardon him as long as you deport him.
I don't know how biblical that is.
Did you hear General Milley is being talked about too?
He should be. Milley should be.
Why did you say that?
Why? Yeah, I want to know why.
Davis is a military lawyer, so he knows all.
Oh, that's what. Okay, let's get in it because Davis, what I feel like is happening right now is that they're saying, "Oh boy, we better sweep all this stuff under the rug because this is exactly where we'll be found out." And so they're kind of, in one sense, doing this. They're telling us exactly where to poke, and it right because this is where they feel like they're guilty at.
Right. No, and look, Milley intentionally lied to, deceived Trump, and publicly stated he was going to defy orders during Trump's first administration as a uniformed military member. They were lying. They were intentionally lying to him about troop numbers in Syria, other things he wanted done in Syria, and all of that. And then he's everybody in the military knows Milley's a child thief, so he should be prosecuted for that.
A child thief?
So,
say that again.
Child thief. Child thief. Stealing MRE, stealing food from other military members. That's what we call it. We call it a chow thief.
Okay. I was like, him and Hunter been hanging out? I didn't know what was going on.
No, we don't have any proof of that. We don't have any proof of that.
Oh my goodness.
So I guess this is a weird question too. Who should Biden actually be given a pardon to? Who else should he be thinking about?
Well, I mean, again, if we were living in times where the social compact wasn't broken, I mean, it would be an interesting thing to do for him just to start pardoning J6ers, right? To say, look, with that election is over, my term is coming to an end. That was about this specific election. It's time to heal the land and move forward. So I think that would be a powerful thing for him to do. and would have a huge impact. I mean, I think that would be a huge wow moment for the American people if he was willing to do something like that.
Hey, Davis, I feel like Trump is stuck in the middle of a rock and a hard place, and he's got a nation that is kind of ripped apart in one sense. Lawfare is going on all over the place. There's some real justice that needs to take place inside of America at the head, all the way through, actually. And so if he comes in and decides to say, I'm going to set things right, I don't know how it doesn't look like lawfare, right? Because going in to fix it is going to look like he's coming after the people who came after him because they were the ones who were actually doing the crimes. So then if he goes in to try and do something, I don't know how he looks innocent in this.
Right. I mean, and that's one of the things we really have to look at. We don't want to, the secular humanism, this whole tyrannical authoritarian state has made so many leaps and bounds, particularly in the last 4 years, but even in the Obama administration before that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to push back against this. And there needs to be accountability in many ways. At the same time, what is good for society moving forward. And just because they did it, so we should do it back. I mean, that is not what we should be thinking as Christians. Just because they did something doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it moral just because that's happened. And that's the only justification anyone has for these pardons anyway, as well. Trump pardoned this person or Bush pardoned this person. And so we're going to do the same thing. They pardon family members, whatever it might be. That's usually they did it, so it's okay for us. We need to get away from that. I mean, that's one of the things we need to say is, look, there's a higher authority here. We need to step back. We need to do what's right. And just spending all of this time seeking accountability is there. And Trump did that to an extent in his first term. I mean, there was plenty of things that Hillary Clinton could and arguably should have been investigated for by the DOJ. Then Trump said, we're not going to do that. I'm not going to go after my political enemies in that way. But again, Trump to an extent, I think he's learning, but he's assuming good faith in people that have none.
Davis, I got to tell you though, bro, I'm going to tell you, this time feel different though. Last time, I mean,
well, he had a second term and he was trying to, get ready for.
I mean,
he's going to burn the bridges.
Look, when you get done being president and you spend the next 3 to 4 years in courts,
right,
with people trying to take all of your money, destroy your children, destroy your family, assassinate you
twice or more.
I mean, It's hard. Like, part of me is like, do the cleaning. It's going to hurt.
Yeah.
Right. But I don't want him to do it because of revenge, but because we really do need justice to reign. And him not taking care of the situation where he possibly can is going to allow justice to be put on the shelf. And so we're just in this weird place where it's almost like you want to tell the American people, buckle up and pray that God gives this man wisdom on how to really clean the house in the most judicious way possible. Yeah. And find places. I think if you do this, you got to find places where you can give mercy, but you got to set up such a system as like, we will never do this again. Do you understand me?
Right.
We will never.
That's right.
Right.
Never do this again. And so he's got to walk a fine line. And I see people that he's putting in place and I'm like, okay, that's helpful. Right. That looks like, but it's a weird thing because I think you can turn a lot of this middle group people who have come on because they have rejected the left, might feel a little weird when Trump says, no, I'm going to clean house. And I think he can lose the momentum of the nation or the country deciding to do it. I think it'd be good for us, but it's going to hurt.
Right. And I think there has to be, we need to pray for a lot of wisdom and discernment in what's done, how it's done, when it's done, and who he actually goes after.
Our friends at Backwards Planning Financial are giving away one custom engraved Mont Blanc pen to a loyal Pub TV subscriber at the end of the year. We are drawing a name today to be entered into the pot for the grand prize drawing that will occur in December, which, if you're paying attention, is this month. So like later this month. Like I guess that's the grand prize. Okay. So the lucky name that has been drawn today is Timothy Erickson. Timothy Erickson, you're the winner. Is there like any Sorry. You don't need to do anything, Timothy. Just just listen to the show in December. Well, if you're listening to it right now, you're listening in December.
It's probably the wives shows will probably maybe we'll
the wives show.
Yeah,
okay, all right. Yeah, we do our annual wives show.
Yeah.
So keep listening in December to see if you're the big winner. So everybody that's been drawn, like there's been one a month or a couple times a month. I don't know what it was. They're all going into the pot, and we're going to draw a grand prize winner, and you get that fancy schmancy,
that amazing pen. Yeah.
Davis, I was just thinking, if you were Attorney General, is that what it would be, AG?
AG?
Mm-hmm. If that was you and you had that opportunity, what would you do? What would you be doing right now? Like, where would you, if you, or even had the ear of the Attorney General and say, listen, here goes game plan. What would be your game plan?
Well, this is where I would say if I could do what I wanted to do, I would abolish the Department of Justice. The FBI would no longer exist, and we would actually have real change that matters.
I'm interested.
So yeah, that's where I would want to just tear down the whole thing. I would want to make an argument that that's way too much power in the federal government. We don't need a Department of Justice, and this should go back to the states and be handled by interstate compacts. So
can you make that argument? Like, what's the sketch of that argument? Like,
radical there.
I mean, I thought I was radical, and I'm like, whoa, Davis, whoa.
I like it. I like this guy.
Well, first of all, think the FBI is not that old. The FBI has not been around that long. And really, the Department of Justice, the whole DOJ, is really just about prosecuting and managing the crimes that the FBI brings to it, right? Mm-hmm. So before we had the FBI, the states prosecuted crimes. And now we're not in the Bonnie and Clyde era where bank robbers are just going to cross state lines and not be prosecuted. You can have interstate compacts. All of these crimes could be prosecuted at a state level. So I think that this whole idea that we need an independent Department of Justice at the federal level to do anything related to criminal things, the FBI or anything else, could be completely done away with. And then the only thing the DOJ would really be doing would be defending or litigating on behalf of the federal government in civil actions. And most of those are unnecessary if we get rid of the Chevron doctrine, the deference doctrine for administrative agencies, and we peel back on the agencies and go back to a constitutional process. So, that sounds like a loaded question, but to me, I mean, I think the Attorney General should have a very, very a small job. Maybe it's arguing in front of the Supreme Court with the Solicitor General on a few cases, and that's about it.
But didn't we get rid of the Chevron doctrine? I mean, didn't basically the Supreme Court rule that was a mute doctrine?
They have certainly pulled it back, but there's still, there's a whole lot more that has to be done. Yeah. And the problem is you only get that kind of relief when companies and individuals can afford to go up against the Leviathan of the federal government and spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars in 5 years getting into court to get it overturned, whatever the regulation or tax or anything else is.
Right.
So then I'm trying to think about what that would look like. I mean, if you just abolished it, all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of crimes inside of states that would go unpunished
or go to the state
or they wouldn't. I mean, they can barely handle their load now, just managing the basic justice,
Do you know
traffic
something
tickets
like
and stuff.
92% of federal employees don't even go into the office. I bet the same things at the state level. I bet they could handle all these cases.
They're just not.
But
that'd be,
and maybe another way to ask the same question, Davis, would be: so constitutionally, what is required constitutionally?
Yeah, that's good.
So what does our Constitution say about the needs of the federal government in terms of a Department of Justice?
I don't think I don't think there's a real constitutional justification for it. I mean, I just don't think there is. I don't think it's necessary as part of that. I mean, you can make the argument that the federal government does need attorneys on some level. So there would be some specific things. Again, I'm thinking more in terms of potential civil litigation or otherwise, but I think it should be a very, very small office. And really, the whole idea that the Department of Justice is so heavily involved in these criminal prosecutions, we can look at the exception and say, can the states really handle this? Or the state's going to be overwhelmed. But we've created our own monster. And the crazy thing about U.S. attorneys and the Department of Justice anyway is that almost 99% of federal criminal charges result in a guilty plea because the sentencing guidelines are so extreme. And federal judges have so little wiggle room that what happens is, any client of mine facing federal charges is usually facing like hundreds of years in prison. And so even if they are innocent, there is such tremendous pressure to plead it down and plead to something in order to avoid decades, or life in prison. Yeah. So that all of that is a broken system. But listen, we survived as a nation, and you could argue in many respects we thrived before there was an FBI and before there was this Leviathan of U.S. Attorney's office.
You even remember the federal FBI was started under Woodrow Wilson. And it wasn't started legally. It was not started constitutionally. I don't think it was until the 1930s that the FBI as an agency was voted on.
It's actually legal.
To become a legal constitutional agency, and just in terms of the protocol of how you vote on an agency. So it wasn't recognized by Congress until I think the 1930s.
The Department of Justice was formed in 1870. That's just
wow. That's right after Civil War,
right? That's interesting. Like that's like that historical moment is.
We need DOJ to keep us from a Civil War.
Well, no, to
clean up. To clean up.
I mean, this is the aftermath.
The states aren't going to clean up, so we need a federal.
The aftermath of the statism that was
out of the Civil War.
One of the things that's in the aftermath of the Civil War.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean that's during Reconstruction. That's when many 14th, 15th, 16th amendments are passing.
Yeah.
13, 14, 15.
Yeah.
And they're and that's beginning to consolidate power in the federal government.
Wow.
So
that was 5 years after the Civil War.
Yeah. Right. So that's pretty remarkable, and that's really striking. That so for 100 years.
Yeah.
We didn't have a Department of Justice, and somehow we survived.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so apparently before that, I mean, you have a Supreme Court that's functioning. You have a Solicitor General, I guess. You have these states, but you didn't need the Department of Justice. You didn't need the FBI. You didn't.
Not until the federal government, as a federal government, was threatened.
Yeah. But your point, Davis, that point about like the penalties.
Yes.
And also like going up against the federal government. Like there's something about that
unlimited resources.
Yeah, they are not limited financially at all.
Going after you.
Right. That's right.
Like that itself is like you're already it's already an unjust setup.
Yeah, that's right.
Which I've never really thought about.
No, I mean, look at use a recent example of the COVID cases, right? So a military member going into federal court to seek an injunction to stop them from, kicking them out of the military over an unlawful mandate. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in litigation in just attorney's fees in order to fight that, because the federal government in every case like that, their playbook is the same. It is every single motion in the world. It is every single procedural block they can think of. And their goal, and I tell this to people that reach out to me all the time, their goal is going to be to bankrupt you. Yeah. The federal government's going to want to bankrupt you, and they're never going to run out of money, because if they did, they're just going to print more anyway.
That's all about you won. Yeah.
But wouldn't that be?
Of course, you're going to plead. I'm innocent.
Abolish the. I mean, like I'm just thinking, like just structurally.
Yeah.
Just structurally, that's wicked.
Yeah, that's right.
Is that any different though on the state level?
The state attorney general has unlimited money.
I was going to say they can bankrupt you too, though,
to some extent.
Yeah.
Especially if they're getting funded by the government.
But that's an easier thing to deal with, though.
But yeah, I mean, it's closer to home, and they're not printing the dollars.
Yeah, that's right.
Yet.
Right.
Right. Thanks.
I'm just saying.
I would like an Idaho dollar.
It wouldn't be worth much.
Idaho gold.
Davis, every time I go on X, I always see that Younts Law is having some sort of wins. What's the most recent wins you guys have had?
Oh, man, just this week, I finally had one of the last COVID cases that I was dealing with finally get favorably resolved. So believe it or not, it was a local restaurant owner here in Pennsylvania. He was having a private party for his family. He was celebrating his retirement, and there were law enforcement officers driving around town in Pennsylvania, looking in the windows. I'm not kidding you. This was testimony on the record, looking in the windows of restaurants and bars to see if people were were violating the rules, if there are too many people in there, if they were properly wearing masks or not. So there were like 5 people in my client's restaurant. They weren't even open to the public. The front door wasn't locked though, and they were having this private celebration. And unmarked car, not in uniform, law enforcement officer wearing a mask, not identifying himself, comes into the restaurant, walks up to the bar, goes behind the bar in a closed space with my client's wife, fails to identify himself, and starts, getting in the face of my client's wife because they're not wearing masks. My client's wife doesn't speak English. And so then there was a confrontation. And so originally, my client was charged with multiple felonies for the interaction that he had with this law enforcement officer who didn't identify himself, was wearing a mask in plain clothes. It was wild. So just finally this week, after a lot of effort, motions practice, and other things, we finally got all of the felony charges dismissed, all of the misdemeanor charges dismissed, and the judge found no disorderly conduct and other things. So after 3 years of fighting this, my client will pay a $50 fine and go about his business.
Why do they have to pay a fine?
Because during the interaction, he took the mask down of the law enforcement officer because he wanted it captured on his closed circuit TV. So the judge said, I don't even want to do this, but that meets the definition under Pennsylvania law of a summary offense. So like a traffic citation for harassment because you touched his mask.
Oh,
but then the judge gave him the minimum punishment he could.
Clemency.
Which was a $50 fine. Clemency. Exactly.
Clemency.
Exactly.
So then if you're going to press charges against Fauci, I'm guessing you would just say what? What would be your, okay, if we're going to go after Fauci, you would charge him with what?
Well, I mean, first is lying to Congress. I mean, multiple false statements to Congress.
Remember Rand Paul pointed that out.
Yes, that's true. Yeah,
that's right. I would just start there. I mean, I think that there's that. I think there's probably corruption, potential bribery. There's questions about, what he did and who he misled as far as all of this research. But I think the easy kill, so to speak, is just false statements to Congress because there's plenty.
Did you see? I think it was a congressional report came out last week that said the virus was officially leaked from the Wuhan lab. Did you see that?
The China.
I didn't read it. I heard about it, but I didn't read it.
Davis, you've been working with military members throughout COVID.
Yes.
And we've been talking to you here and there whenever you've had significant situations going down. I understand that Trump has made it pretty clear that he's planning on reinstating military members that want to be reinstated if they were fired for refusing to take the vaccine. Can you summarize what you're aware of and what you think is coming down the pike?
Are they all getting pardoned?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, most of them, the military was afraid to go to trial, right? So when we tried to go to trial, they backed down and just did everything by bureaucratic administrative tyranny. So the president does have the authority to wipe the military records clean and allow people to come back in and continue to serve. So the discharges can be changed and all of that. So that's really what he's talking about. He's saying, hey, we'll wipe the slate completely clean. We'll allow people to come back in. Here's the problem, though. Unless we have a Secretary of Defense that these people trust, that, hundreds of clients that I had during this trust and completely trust, many don't want to go back in.
Yeah.
Many don't trust the system and don't want to go back in. So, that's why the battle for someone like Pete Hegseth to become Secretary of Defense, I think, is so important because, if he gets in, I think there's a lot of people that will trust him. I think you'll see an immediate boost in recruiting. But if it's somebody else that isn't trusted, that's sort of part of the establishment system, I'm not sure. I would be surprised if more than 5 or 10% of those people even want to come back in and serve.
So, so that was going to be my follow-up question is, and what is your take and what are you hearing broadly with your military connections on the Pete Hegseth nomination?
So, a couple of things. First of all, he's not perfect, right? This guy is someone who has a past. He has a history, but he is also a fairly new Christian. He goes to a CREC church. He's in good standing with his church. He's doing a lot of things to walk with Christ now. So I think that's just a fascinating part of his life story. But from a broader military perspective, this is a combat veteran, a combat leader. This is someone who has pulled a trigger in combat, and he has never worked for, a military contractor. He's never been a lobbyist for a military contractor. So he comes from outside sort of the military industrial complex, DC swamp system. And that's what people want to see. That's what people in the military want to see today. People are tired of, Secretary Austin and Milley and these others that are just bureaucrats that, haven't really led in combat. And when they have been in charge of things like the withdrawal from Afghanistan, it's been an absolute abject disaster.
Right.
So they want to see someone come in that understands what it means to have a lethal military, what the priorities are, and I think that's what, military members want to see. And there's a lot of issues with that. I mean, listen, people in the military don't want to serve with transgenders, right? They don't want to serve with mentally unstable people,
right,
trying to shower, in women's bathrooms and other things. They don't want that. They don't want that instability. They don't want to have to carry the load for someone who's not combat ready because they're on hormones, and they've had this surgery or whatever else. So that's a huge factor in this as well. And I think the women in combat issue is a significant issue. He's been pretty clear position in that. And and I think that's a huge morale booster as well, because it does have an impact on combat units. It does have an impact on the ability to complete the mission and do it effectively. So all of those things are significant factors that will encourage people and make them want to serve. And I think it would be a huge boost to morale.
One of our listeners saying on YouTube, if only he worked for Lockheed Martin.
Do you think so? One of the questions our friend David Bonson, I saw he posted earlier today.
I meant to read that,
and he said, he was happy to just sort of be like, I understand he has a past. I'm happy to take things at face value that, he's repentant. As far as, a bunch of the other charges, he says, I just assume they're Kavanaughing him. Yeah. That kind of thing. So I think, relatively justice, fair, balanced approach. But he said the one question he has remaining is he actually qualified? Is Hegseth actually qualified? It's one thing to have combat experience. It's one thing to be a soldier, a leader of soldiers. But his question is just, and I think it was just an honest, straight up question. He's just saying, but is he qualified to be the Secretary of Defense to make those kind of calls?
I'm gonna let Davis answer.
Yeah,
right. I love Bonson. That's my guy.
Yeah,
but compared to who?
Yeah.
Because the people who are supposedly qualified now are transing our military, taking good men who can fight, and then taking away their privileges and forcing them to have a shot, and then making us weak all the way around.
Women in the military,
he can't be worse.
Putting together marketing videos to recruit people, showing pregnant women in the marketing videos in the military.
I get it, but we're talking about a guy. All anybody has to do is say no women in the military. No crazy people in the military. And if you're married, use a bathroom like a man's supposed to do in the man's room. And then all of a sudden, we have a deadly fighting force.
You're saying that he's qualified.
The bar is low.
We said that about churches and COVID.
Davis, I'm sorry, I took your answer.
No. I think you're right. I think it is time for a disruptor. And what I mean by that is someone from outside the system with a different perspective, with a boots on the ground, combat leadership perspective. I think that's one piece of this. But listen, he also ran a large nonprofit, which is the only nonprofit that was effective for advocating for veterans anyway, because the others don't ever, make any moves. So any of the few improvements you've seen with like the Veterans Affairs Administration, this privatization and stuff like that, the nonprofit he was running was responsible for a lot of those things, those real solutions. So he has run a large organization. He's done it well. And what the Department of Defense needs right now, again, is someone that's a combat leader that understands what it's like, that understands the wars we're fighting now, the wars we've fought in now, but also comes in with the perspective, with the truth of God's law that has that biblical perspective to come in and actually reform and potentially cause a revival in our military forces. And that's what we need. That's what we need.
So if not Hegseth, then who?
I don't even want to think about that yet. I mean, DeSantis was floated. I think that would be interesting, but it's not a disruptor. I mean, listen, as a military veteran, a retired military officer, with where we're at now in our military, we need someone to come in and burn about 90% of the chaff away and take the hardened 10% that's left and build from there. That's what needs to happen. We need a much smaller, much less bureaucratic, much more lethal, combat-ready military if it's ever going to mean anything again. Well, so there's a lot that needs to be torn down.
That's our whole country right now. It's in that shape, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Man, I always enjoy talking to you, Davis.
Too,
and this has been good. I was just thinking earlier, back to the pardons conversation, I was thinking, one of the things that also ought to be at the top of the list in terms of like where a pardon is legitimate is when there have been unjust convictions.
Oh, right.
So this is another example.
Right.
Like, so it's not even. Right. So you were talking about the ones where they actually have done something, and at the very least, identifying what I've done, admitting it.
That's right.
And then there being room for forgiveness, clemency, whatever. But I was thinking like David Daleiden deserves a full presidential pardon.
Yeah.
And a Medal of Honor.
Yeah.
For exposing the butchers in California.
100%.
Facts.
Right?
That's right.
100%.
But like that, I mean, it also applies. Again, it applies to a lot of the J6ers. Maybe not all of them, but a lot of them.
Right.
I mean, the guys that were doing stuff in the offices and actually breaking windows, like they should pay for the windows.
At least they should have a fair trial.
Yeah. But the people that were just walking through there and taking pictures and walking down the aisles, that kind of thing, and those people, completely pardoned. The pro-lifers.
Oh, easily.
Right. People who are praying outside of abortion clinics and they got the FACE Act thrown at them, completely pardoned.
Yep.
Because there it's like God's law trumps. No pun intended. Our civil law. It trumps our criminal law. It trumps our law. Right. And so that would be at least another place where godly leadership says, no, I don't care. That use the example you did
about your FACE Act.
Yeah, well, or I was going to say, your FACE Act, or I don't care about your Pennsylvania law that says that if technically speaking, if you pulled somebody's mask down in the middle of this unwarranted search, technically I pardon that. Yeah, because given the spirit of what happened,
I would have pardoned him if you shot him. You just came on my property with no name, trespassing.
You can't shoot. You can't shoot people.
Don't take that as mask. Just shoot him.
No, we do not acknowledge anything.
I'm just saying, hypothetically.
Davis, you're going to have a client over here real soon.
Davis is like, quick, say the line. Davis, if you're single, if you're married.
Give everybody your website so they can keep in touch with what you're doing.
And where to donate.
So our website for the law firm is just my last name, yountzlaw.com. I'm on X at Davis Younts. The nonprofit that we work with, started by pastors during COVID, is Stand With Warriors. So standwithwarriors.org. Doing a lot of good stuff over there. And just, again, gents, a lot of fun to be with you. Appreciate the time. This has been great.
Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, cheers.
All right, if you're single, get married. If you're married, have you a bunch of kids. And if you have some kids, you need to go baptize them. Until tomorrow, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. This is CrossPolitic.
Armored Republic's mission is to equip free men with the tools of liberty to protect their God-given rights. With that goal in mind, we've created a new product identification framework to make the world of body armor easier to understand for both the new customer and the experienced professional alike. To help you quickly identify the right armor for your needs, we now have 4 categories of armor products, each named after the material used as the strike faces of that line. Our S Series, A Series, P Series, and our C Series. For example, our S Series armor features products with a soft strike face, the functional surface of the armor that handles the initial impact from a projectile. All S Series soft body armor products are made using ballistic fabrics, such as aramids like Kevlar. Soft armor is typically the only type of armor that's flexible. It's also the best choice for concealment under normal clothes. Hard armor plates with higher protection ratings capable of stopping rifle rounds are usually heavier and bulkier. If you're looking for increased protection above and beyond what soft armor offers, we have 3 series of hard armor inserts. A-Series armor is made from our unique blends of metal alloys. Among these are the classic rifle-rated steel plates our company is known for, which have enabled hundreds of thousands of Americans to acquire high-quality armor at an affordable price. While often heavy, metal alloys exhibit many positive properties, including multi-hit capability, edge-to-edge protection, and the least backface deformation, where the impact of a round causes the side closest to the wearer to bulge inwards. At Armor Republic, we are constantly working to innovate the alloy armor industry, developing new strategies to reduce the weight of metal alloy armor while retaining its excellent protective qualities. P-Series armor is constructed from polyethylene, or PE for short. These are lightweight plates consisting of many compressed layers of high-strength polymers capable of stopping bullets with minimal fragmentation risk. Light enough to float, P-Series armor is strong enough to stop all handgun rounds as well as many rifle rounds. However, they tend to be more expensive and can exhibit some of the most severe backface deformation. The strike faces in our C-Series armor are made of ceramic, the hardest midweight material used in body armor construction. While monolithic ceramic armor cannot withstand multiple hits due to its brittle composition, it's the only armor material capable of stopping an armor-piercing .30 caliber round. Due to their rigid construction, all of our hard armor series A, P, and C plates also provide effective slash and stab protection from edged weapons. Not all body armor is equal. Each material has its own characteristics that are important to understand when selecting your life-saving equipment. Our new series names highlight the 4 materials that we use to produce body armor products here in our Phoenix, Arizona facility, so that you can make a more informed decision about which type is best for your unique considerations. Within each series, our armor inserts will be numbered to indicate the relative performance characteristics of each plate inside that category. For example, our A1 plate is an entry-level alloy armor product, while our A2 plate is still alloy but with improved capabilities or features. When you shop online for body armor at ArmoredRepublic.com, you'll be able to use these new series names to intuitively sort through our many product offerings and locate the armor that best fits your needs.